Today's video digs into a really messed up crime done by a twisted person who thought nobody was paying attention. We're talking about Shelby Thornburg's case. So when Houston cops had to piece together this awful crime scene, they had this creepy surveillance video to work with. You can see this chill-looking guy heading toward an elevator. 23 minutes pass, and he's walking out of the building looking just as casual. Here's the heartbreaking part: he'd just murdered Shelby Thornburg, who was only 20 years old at the time. Cops figured it'd be pretty straightforward to track down her killer with this footage and everything else they had, but this was a super planned-out act. So what's the deal with Shelby Thornburg? Why'd somebody want her dead? And is there ever gonna be justice for her? But hey, before we keep going, I'm curious, where are you guys watching from right now? Whether you're somewhere in the States, halfway around the world, or anywhere else, drop it in the comments down below. It's pretty cool to see how far these stories actually reach. And if you're finding this case as intriguing as I am, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. Alright, let's get back to it. Houston's the biggest city you'll find in Texas and ranks 4th in the whole country. People also call it the energy capital of the planet, and it's got the world's biggest medical complex. Houston's really proud of how massive it is, which totally makes sense when you think about its huge personality. There's so much going on that makes this city buzz. First off, it's growing like crazy, which means folks from everywhere are packing up and heading there. America's famous for amazing food, but Texas really takes things to another level. Picture this: you hop in a car from downtown Houston and head 12 miles west on Highway 69, and you'll hit Sharpstown, this little area packed with Asian spots like noodle joints and quick food places. Back in 2015, Sharpstown was the go-to for shopping, grabbing a bite, and catching movies. It was an awesome place to hang out, enjoy some good comfort food, and catch up with your friends. But when folks in the neighborhood woke up on November 5th, they got hit with some terrible news. So around 9:54 at night, this guy rings up the Houston police on November 4, 2015, and he's totally panicked. He's telling the cops his girlfriend isn't texting him back, so they need to check on her. He'd headed back to her place to make sure she's okay since she'd been quiet for way too long. What he finds breaks his heart: her lifeless body lying there in the living room. He's absolutely certain this wasn't some accident. His girlfriend had been straight up murdered. When police show up at the house, they find everything in pretty rough shape. There's this small bed that's been pushed up next to the couch in the living room. That's where they found Shelby Thornburg's body, slumped over the bed. You could tell right away she'd been killed in a violent way. There's this massive gash, like 6 inches long, going across her neck. Her left jugular vein was sliced through and her left carotid artery was messed up. The cut went all the way through the soft parts and hit her vertebrae at C3 and C5. With injuries that bad and that deep, it's pretty obvious she bled out. Shelby was lying face down with no clothes on when she passed, and her laundry was sitting right next to the bed. This really points to her being killed for sexual reasons. On top of that, she had a bunch of defensive injuries on her hands, wrists, and elbows. While Shelby's death would have crushed everyone who knew her, Christina, who's her sister, got hit the hardest by this. We'll get into why that is in just a bit. When Christina got the news, she just couldn't wrap her head around it. And after that 4 a.m. phone call, she rushed down to Houston first thing in the morning to find her sister. It wasn't until she got to the apartment, saw all the cops there, and looked at Shelby's ID that it really hit home. Her baby sister was gone, and there's no bringing her back. Shelby moved around to different places throughout her life. So naturally, different folks would enter and leave her circle. Sure, the cops would dig into all of them over the next few months, but let's talk about Shelby herself first before we get into who might have done this to her. She came into the world in Wise County, Texas on August 18, 1995. Her mom and dad were Robert and Leslie, and she was their second kid and youngest girl. Christina, her big sister, rounded out the family. Here's the sad part: both Shelby and Christina grew up mostly in a broken home. Their dad was locked up for reasons nobody really talks about, and from what I've gathered, he was a pretty terrible guy. So that left their mom trying to take care of both girls on her own. Things started out okay between them, but then she ended up getting hooked on drugs, which was really heartbreaking. A lot of times, this meant they were constantly dodging CPS. The harm done to Shelby and Christina when they were kids was something they'd never really get over, and pretty soon, their mom couldn't handle them anymore. This meant both sisters bounced around foster homes constantly. And honestly, it's not shocking that the system kept letting them down again and again. Christine got abused by her foster parents, and when their awful father finally got released from prison, he made everything worse by abusing both his daughters and actually renting them out. Christina and Shelby stayed forever bonded to each other because of the horrific stuff that went down in their lives. With everything seeming to work against them, they knew they at least had each other to count on. So yeah, it's totally understandable that both girls turned into best friends. Christina was Shelby's big sister and really stepped into this motherly role with her. That's a caring and gentle quality she's still got going today. When you think about Shelby, all that stress and hurt she dealt with growing up really seemed to mess with her mental health. This made her deal with depression when she was young, and that depression pushed her toward food as a way to cope. She stood just 5 feet and 1 inch tall, but by the time she hit her late teens, she'd gained over 300 pounds. Now look, you can be whatever weight feels right for you, but Shelby realized this wasn't matching up with her dreams. Shelby had this goal of becoming a model, so she kicked off this really intense plan to drop a ton of weight. Here's the thing, Shelby was incredibly determined about it. She changed how she ate, hit the gym multiple times every week, and did tons of cardio work. She dropped over 100 pounds in under 2 years, which is honestly amazing for anyone working on losing weight. It's really no shocker that Shelby's confidence shot up after she transformed herself. She felt happy for lots of reasons, not just the weight loss. Around that same time, she decided to get a fresh start in the city and leave her problems behind. This led to her moving into the Conquistador apartment building in Sharpstown, which you can find on board. Back then, the high-rise was considered pretty upscale, and it wasn't that far from downtown. Shelby also had this boyfriend, a guy called Marcus Dwayne Johnson, who connected everything together.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
Sadly, this is where things start going downhill for her. But first, let me explain what she had planned for her future so you can really get where she was coming from. Shelby was pumped about losing all that weight so fast. But here's what you'd probably expect, she now had some loose skin hanging around. She had this modeling dream, so she figured she needed surgery to remove that extra skin. Since surgery's gonna cost you serious money, she had to come up with the cash first. Marcus wasn't actually her boyfriend, not really. Turns out they might have dated way back, but now he was basically running things for her. As for that fancy apartment she was living in, she was covering part of it through him. Her family didn't know what was really going down at first. They thought she and Marcus were in a serious relationship. And sure, her sister eventually figured it out, but she wasn't happy about how things were going. But like you probably already know, getting out of this kind of situation is super tough, and it's not gonna happen overnight. Shelby pretty quickly became a high-end escort after she moved to Houston and got into this apartment complex. She started seeing male clients who'd pay her for services right from her own place. He'd handle setting up all her appointments and meetings and take a cut of the cash for himself. That money also went toward covering the apartment. Unfortunately, wanting to pull in big money from her escort work backfired on her, and she got busted in 2014 for prostitution. When she landed in jail a second time that same year, her family found out about her secret life. The news really shocked tons of people who knew and loved Shelby. Shelby herself was scared to walk away from the world she was trapped in. Being in that line of work wasn't what she wanted long-term, but right now it was a quick solution. We're all aware that this type of work brings massive risks and dangers with it. What made things even riskier for her was bringing her clients straight back to where she actually lived. Shelby, though, felt stuck and couldn't bail on the business whether for safety reasons or money reasons. Sadly, everything was gonna end in the absolute worst way. So what actually went down with Shelby that night? What clues got left behind to help figure out who did this to her? First things first, how her body was positioned made it look like this went down either just before, while, or right after consensual activity. This suggests the person who killed her was most likely one of her clients. Obviously, everyone started looking hard at Marcus. He was usually the one connecting her with all her clients. I mean, the cops questioned him so many times, and I'm betting they grilled him for hours, but he genuinely didn't know who killed her. Their only contact with each other was through phones, never face-to-face. Honestly, Marcus had a rock-solid alibi, one that checked out and the authorities accepted. After checking him out thoroughly since there weren't any obvious suspects, the cops started investigating the case way more carefully. After going over the crime scene super thoroughly, the cops figured out the killer had planned and pulled off the murder really carefully. Even though they spent a long time inside the place, they couldn't find any fingerprints or bodily fluids anywhere. This is especially weird since they were in a pretty intimate situation. Actually, there was just one bit of DNA discovered at the crime scene. But that DNA didn't give them any solid leads when they searched it through local and national databases. But cops did find other clues and bits of evidence that'd help them work out who attacked her. In fact, they got really lucky and found security footage of the person they think killed Shelby. At 8:34 at night, you can see this guy walking through the main entrance area of the Conquistador on the security cameras. The guy was white and had on shorts, sneakers, sunglasses, and a light-colored sweatshirt. You can see this relaxed-looking guy heading toward the elevators and then stopping for a quick second at the hallway's end. What's interesting is that 22 minutes down the road, you can spot him walking out of the building. From clips of the building online, we know for sure this is from the entrance to the elevator that goes up to her floor. Folks pointed out that he's still looking calm and he's got on the exact same outfit as when he walked in. He's keeping his left hand stuffed in his pocket the whole time, which kind of looks like he's maybe trying to hide an injury or possibly a weapon. Beyond that, his body language tells us a whole lot. He seems chill, but at 8:57 and 1 second, you catch him with his head hanging down, which might mean he's feeling ashamed or guilty about something. He could also be keeping his hand in his pocket just out of habit, or maybe because he's feeling guilty or uneasy. He refuses to look at anybody to his left as he's walking out the entrance, and those shades stay on his face even though it's getting close to 9 at night. When it's nighttime, it's pretty clear he didn't want anybody seeing or remembering what he looked like. When cops got all this info together, they figured they finally had something solid and they'd track down a suspect pretty quick. Hate to say it, but I've got some disappointing news for you. They still haven't caught her killer even though this happened like 9 years ago. And yup, this is one of those super frustrating situations where surveillance pictures of the killer's face and body haven't led anywhere. People who were hanging around when he came into the hallway have no clue who he is, and supposedly Marcus doesn't know either. Let's take a deeper look at that security footage. First though, let me fill you in on what the cops discovered on Shelby's phone. Turns out Shelby had been chatting with this guy who'd found her on Backpage throughout November 4th. Backpage was this website that was mainly famous for being where workers could advertise their services. Side note here, 3 folks who used to run the Backpage website got convicted last year for helping enable prostitution and money laundering through the platform. James Lynn, who was the 4th person who founded it, took his own life before his trial could happen. This true crime YouTuber and writer named Gavin Fish actually tracked down the ad for her. It goes, she's a blonde beauty who guarantees satisfaction in every way. You can reach her by phone. Her number's right there on the ad. What's interesting is the guy she was texting that day ended up being the same one who showed up at her place that night. Just to keep the timeline straight, Shelby's aunt shot her a text at 8 o'clock at night wanting to chat. Shelby texted back, "I'm busy working and can't talk right now, 'cause I've gotta see a client." Shelby's new client sent her a text at 8:06 saying, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She texts back just 1 minute later at 8:07 with, "Okay." At 8:33 at night, he messages her again saying, "Hey, I'm outside." And right at 8:34, there he is on camera walking through the entrance while looking at his phone. What he does next is go sit in the lobby's back area. The public camera footage stops right there, but we can figure he probably got up to Shelby's apartment about 6 minutes later around 8:40. Then Shelby sends a message to Marcus saying just, "Good."
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you and back to the video.
Marcus explained later this was their code for everything's cool and Shelby was comfortable with whoever she was seeing. This bit of info matters a lot because it proves later that things were totally fine when her killer first entered the apartment. This fact, plus there being zero signs of anyone forcing their way in, really suggests her killer fooled her into believing he was just another regular client. Marcus never got another message from Shelby after that, which really sucks. The autopsy revealed she got killed pretty soon after she sent that text. Her client slipped out of the apartment building quietly 17 minutes after everything seemed fine and nobody's spotted him since. Marcus headed back over to her apartment after sending multiple texts but getting zero replies. He came across her lifeless body right before 1 in the afternoon. At this stage of looking into things, the cops felt confident they'd nail the person who killed her. They didn't just have the surveillance footage, they also had a phone number to work with. She got killed, but it was super obvious the person behind it knew exactly what they were doing since they grabbed it just before doing the crime, paid with cash, and didn't attach any personal details to it. What it really was a burner phone, and the cops had no way to track him down anymore. Plus, the phone got switched off pretty much immediately after the murder and never got used again after that. Bottom line, it was incredibly tough to figure out whose it was. All this info really strongly points to Shelby's killer having a crystal clear plan to kill her and dodge getting busted by the cops. It gets even worse, which really sucks. Turns out this guy had been reaching out to other workers in the neighborhood in the weeks leading up to killing Shelby. They all seemed to match Shelby's look since they were all blonde and on the shorter side. So it's pretty clear he was set on killing someone and had even worked out the details. Also, it doesn't seem like Shelby's death was something personal against her. There's tons of talk and even some decent theories suggesting Shelby might have been targeted specifically or maybe to get revenge on Marcus, but this evidence seems to prove that's not what happened. Again, when you look at the surveillance footage, it's incredibly frustrating that we know so much about how Shelby's killer looked, but we still can't identify him. We're all pretty used to watching surveillance videos that look like they were shot with a potato. But for something from 2015, this camera was actually pretty decent. In other words, we know the killer's race, skin color, jaw shape, where his hairline is, how he walks, and way more. Now, we can be pretty sure he was physically fit judging by his build and how he carried himself. Because of this, some folks speculate he could be military or maybe a cop. But none of these images have been able to ID him, and even using image enhancement tech and AI hasn't gotten us anywhere. There's also tons of people who suspect Shelby might have been murdered by a serial killer given how methodically she was killed. Now look, that'd make sense, but lots of people have mentioned that no other bodies have turned up in that area. An even more realistic theory is that Shelby got selected by a professional hitman to be taken out. Word is she was getting more and more worried about staying safe and what her future looked like in the weeks before she died. She knew she needed to figure out a different way to earn money after getting arrested twice for prostitution in 1 year. Unfortunately, walking away from the business is really hard since escorts and their handlers often get into serious power battles. In June 2015, Shelby got arrested, and come November, she was dead. In December, over 20 women and handlers in the area got nabbed in this huge undercover sting. Since there was tons of drama happening in the business when she died, Shelby might have been chosen to take the fall and got killed by a hitman to stop other people from going down. Her sister suspects she might have been working as an informant for the cops when she died. If others knew about that, she would have had a massive target on her back. Even with all the evidence and all the different theories floating around, Shelby's killer is still out there somewhere. There's one more thing I gotta bring up before I wrap up this case. And sadly, it involves the police department. Shelby's sister got stuck with the awful task of cleaning up the crime scene after her sister passed. What makes it worse is she had to scrub her sister's blood off the walls and floors. While she was cleaning up, she came across some stuff that should have been collected as evidence. The doormat sitting outside the place was the most obvious thing since the hallways were super dark, making it tough to see what could or couldn't have been on that mat. She did spot that it had a red mark on it after she got back to her own place. But when she rang up the Houston Police Department to mention the doormat might have blood on it, they said it was too late to count as evidence. That advice turned out to be totally wrong looking back. Even though we're not sure what that red mark actually was, Christina's convinced it was blood. The way her killer left with their hand tucked away, probably 'cause it was injured, could have actually cracked this case wide open. Any DNA match from the doormat wouldn't have been usable as evidence in court, but it might have helped ID her killer. What can I say? This is another situation where poor communication inside the police department could have seriously messed up a case. Like always, these screw-ups happen from not having proper training, but by the time anyone notices, it's already too late. Shelby dealt with a really rough childhood. And her sister Christina, who's so caring and kind, was the only thing keeping her from completely falling apart. Even though she's literally the best sister anyone could hope for, she couldn't protect Shelby from the worst possible thing happening in such a dangerous business. Shelby was way more than just a sex worker. So keep that in your head. It's just natural that folks like to sort others into categories and slap labels on them to help us make sense of things and see them more easily. One issue with doing that though is it makes it tough to really see and judge people accurately. Shelby had love to give, took care of people, and gave so much. Her family and friends describe her as hilarious, sweet, and thoughtful. Shelby went through a horrible childhood that would have broken most of us, but she pushed through it and came out strong, motivated, and full of ambition. It was totally clear she was a tough woman who wouldn't let anything block her from reaching her goals. Sadly, terrible luck caught up with her toward the end of her long and difficult journey. Her family's still terrified about this unsolved murder. It's probably true that this surveillance footage runs on repeat in the heads of her family and friends, but all it'd take is for the right person to see it just one time. There's somebody out there who knows something. It might take a while to forget stuff, and it might even make you feel a bit better about your screw-ups. But Christina and Shelby's family are always gonna live with this pain and suffering. So maybe someday some stranger's gonna help give them real peace. There's a $5,000 reward up for grabs for info that leads to catching Shelby Thornburg's killer. Ring up Crime Stoppers. Actually, what's most frustrating about this whole story is it totally can be solved. We just need the right person to come across that video. Now, I want to give a shout out to Gavin Fish real quick. He's put in serious work alongside Shelby's sister to get this case out there for people to see. Thanks so much for watching this intense true crime case. If this video did it for you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it around, and subscribe for more true crime cases. Stay safe out there, stay aware, and I'll catch you in the next one.